A spiritual medium is a person who possesses the ability to convey messages from deceased individuals. During the growth of spiritualism, after-death communication took place in darkened seance rooms. Many women and men were exposed as fraudulent. There are a number of mediums, however, that submitted themselves to strict controls under the scrutiny of scientists and left convincing evidence of the continuation of consciousness after physical death. The 2001 Gallup poll reveals that 21% of people believe people can communicate mentally with someone who has died, and 9% of people believed in channeling or allowing a spirit being to temporarily assume control of body. Spiritualism is the philosophy that the soul or consciousness survives physical death and can communicate with the living. Spiritualism began with suspicious phenomena surrounding the Fox sisters. In March 1848 in Hyattsville, New York, young Margaret and Catherine Fox began allegedly communicating with the spirit of a proposed deceased peddler through a system of raps. The knocking was able to answer questions about the past and even the future. People came from miles around to hear the knocking. When reporter E. E. Lewis published his interpretation of the phenomenon, a pamphlet, a report of the mysterious knocking heard in the house of Mr. John D. Fox, the sisters were inundated with requests for after-death communication. Older Sister Leah took them into her home, and the three began hosting seances. Right away, there was suspicion. The girls were examined by doctors, and in 1851, the men published the raps were caused by the girls' snapping knee joints. In 1888, Maggie was paid a substantial amount to display in front of a large audience at New York Academy of Music how she could produce the mysterious popping noises by cracking her toes. The confession did nothing to injure spiritualism, however. Seances were a popular pastime in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A seance was held in a quiet section of a home. It had to be comfortable. Participants usually sat in chairs around a table holding hands. The room was either completely dark or dimly lit. The medium either sat inside or in front of a so-called spirit cabinet. If a cabinet was not available, curtains were hung in a corner. The atmosphere was light-hearted. To achieve this, some circles sung hymns. A number of odd things could happen during a seance, including cool breezes, knocking or popping noises, being touched by a phantom hand, objects including the seance table moving or levitating, and objects appearing on the table. Similar knocking noises introduced the supposed spiritual gifts of Daniel Douglas Hume during his first seance in 1851 in Hartford, Connecticut. Newspaper owner W.R. Hayden published that the table moved on its own and instruments played without being touched. This endorsement skyrocketed Hume's career. Hume traveled to the United States and Europe, hosting seances for wealthy sitters and living off of their gratuities. He hosted seances for famous figures such as Napoleon III and Queen Sophia of the Netherlands. Hume convinced some of the most hardened skeptics of the authenticity of the phenomena. During a seance for silk tycoon Ward Cheney in August 1852 in South Manchester, Connecticut, Hume was reported to have levitated to the ceiling twice. Chemist and physicist Sir William Crookes wrote that he personally witnessed Hume levitate around 50 times. Hume found himself in a court in 1886. He was sued by a widow identified as Mrs. Lyons to return £60,000 she had given him. Slate writing was a short-lived seance trick used by unscrupulous mediums to convince sitters they were communicating with deceased individuals. American medium Henry Slade introduced slate writing. It seemed to sitters that some invisible agent was writing on slate with chalk in his presence. Slade was exposed as a fraud in September 1876. Former member of the selecting committee of the British Association for Advancement of Science, Ray Lancaster, grabbed a supposedly blank slate at the beginning of the seance and found it was already written on,
etc. Now here are some very ingenious slates which I have taken out of our museum of such objects. Now these slates are very ingenious. Here you see a pair of simple slates, but not quite so simple. And when I tell you I gave £8 for them, you will know that there is a reason for the cost. A touch of a spring and you notice that they are covered with writing and a drawing of an alleged spirit.
A trumpet medium was allegedly able to produce voices from deceased individuals through a trumpet. This phenomenon is easily reproduced by stage magicians. M. Lamar Keene wrote the book The Psychic Mafia in 1976, exposing the fraud that took place at Camp Chesterfield, a spiritualist retreat in Indiana. He revealed the tricks used by the trumpet mediums on the show Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers.
In this book, Keene confessed he'd always been a fake. and explained how he hoodwinked sitters in trumpet seances.
Actually, in a real trumpet seance, what you would see would be this trumpet floating about the room. The spirit voice built within. The trumpet moving, perhaps landing in your lap, perhaps resting in the palms of your hand. You would see the luminous bands here, here, and here. You would feel the resonance of the trumpet from the voice apparently within. But actually what would be happening would be that I would be speaking through this trumpet, and the voice would be vibrating and bouncing from the other trumpet, making it resonate or vibrate.
Physical mediums were allegedly able to produce physical manifestations of spirit influence, such as knocking noises, levitating tables, etc. Some produced a mysterious substance known as ectoplasm. A few even claimed to be able to produce full-bodied apparitions. Stage magicians argued mediums were using cheap tricks to fool bereaved sitters out of their money. Careful investigation by skilled members of Society for Psychical Research revealed some seance phenomena could not be proven fake. The Society for Psychical Research was founded in 1882 in London by influential men who wanted to understand events and abilities commonly described as psychic or paranormal by promoting and supporting important research in this area, and to examine allegedly paranormal phenomena in a scientific and unbiased way. Members went into darkened seance rooms to investigate claims of after-death communication. The Davenport brothers were stage magicians who took spiritualism to vaudeville and were exposed as frauds. Ira Davenport and William Davenport joined actor William Fay and spiritualist Reverend Jesse Babbitt Ferguson and toured America and Europe from 1854 to 1877, convincing audiences the incredible feats were due to spirit intervention. The team introduced the spirit cabinet. The brothers were tied inside a cabinet with musical instruments. The doors would close, and after a while the instruments would play. The doors were later opened to reveal the brothers were still tied.
The Davenport brothers were huge. They started the Modern Escape Act, and their whole thing was, well, we're tied up, so it couldn't possibly be us playing these instruments inside this sealed cabinet when nobody's looking. And one day somebody smeared printer's ink on the back of the violin, and sure enough, the lights went on, and they're still in their trance. So look, we're tied up. It wasn't us, except there's a big fat black smear across his chest. So that's how they got busted.
A trance medium is one that allegedly slips into a dissociate stupor. A proposed discarnate consciousness then speaks through the medium. This alleged spirit control acted as an intermediary between the sitters and the spirit world. If Eusapia Palladino could pull a hand or foot loose during a seance, she would use it to lift a table, pull furniture close to her, etc. However, she convinced many skeptics of the authenticity of her gifts. During the first part of her career, Eusapia's seances were characterized by poltergeist activity. In 1892, she hosted 17 seances in Milan with Caesar Lombroso and Dr. Charles Robert Richet. Investigators hung a curtain in a corner to act as a spirit cabinet. In low light, they saw the curtains billow and felt hands touching them. The same phenomena occurred in 1894 in Richet's home in France. She was investigated by founding members of the Society for Psychical Research. Members also saw objects move around the seance room. Later seances dispelled any doubt some of Eusapia's phenomena was paranormal in origin. At Dr. Charles Robert Richet's home in France in the summer of 1898, she levitated a heavy 48-pound table that was sitting outdoors in broad daylight in the driveway. As it hung 2 feet in the air, Richet and all his guests passed their hands under, over, and around it to confirm it was not being held by some apparatus. Palladino herself stood a distance from the table.